to the opposition leader, Mr. Leader Ramdin, is kindly enter the homes. He's been taken into the homes today, where he'll be safe and comfortable. We are very thankful.
Imagine for a second dropping your child off at a primary school. Structure, safety, hope. You watch them walk through the gates to learn about how society works, about community, and, well, about taking care of one another.
Right, the foundations of being a citizen.
But now imagine that maybe 50 feet away from those gates, a senior citizen has just been left to live and honestly slowly deteriorate inside an abandoned car.
Wow. Just right there in plain sight.
Right there. So how does a community allow both of those realities to exist on the exact same street?
It is a profound kind of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
We condition ourselves to look at the school and just ignore the car. Because trying to reconcile the two is, frankly, simply too uncomfortable.
It's easier to just look away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's this social vanishing act where our brains basically edit out the most vulnerable people just so we can get through our day.
Well, that discomfort is exactly what we're diving into today.
Yeah, it's a heavy one.
It really is. For this deep dive, we are looking at a very stark set of reports and public statements out of Guyana. Specifically, this is regarding a pensioner named Mr. Cyril Ramdin.
Right.
We have gathered local accounts, organizational statements, and political responses that all center around his daily reality.
And his situation serves as a rather brutal case study, honestly.
How so?
Well, it forces us to look closely at how modern bureaucracies function and, more importantly, how they fail the exact people they are ostensibly designed to protect.
Right. So the mission for this deep dive is to take Mr. Ramdin's story and use it to examine the intersection of basic human dignity, our civic duty, and the actual mechanics of political accountability.
It's about seeing the unseen.
Exactly. We need to understand how a person becomes invisible to a system and what specific levers have to be pulled to force that system to see them again.
And to do that, we really have to look at the boundaries of the social contract. What happens when someone loses the economic or physical agency to advocate for themselves?
Yeah, let's start by grounding this in his physical reality because the details here are just staggering.
They really are.
Mr. Ramdin is a senior citizen, right? A pensioner from Enmore on the east coast of Demerara, or ECD.
Right.
And according to the reports, he wasn't living in a makeshift shelter or even an underfunded care facility. He was living in an abandoned car.
And we really must emphasize the term pensioner here.
Yeah, that's key.
This is a person who has spent their life contributing to a system, paying their dues, with this implicit societal promise that there would be some baseline level of care in their twilight years,
And a safety net.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To see that promise end in a derelict vehicle represents a complete collapse of multiple safety nets.
And that collapse is made even more jarring by the geographic location I mentioned at the start.
The school.
Right. The abandoned car is located right near the Enmore Primary School. It is impossible to overstate the contrast there.
It's huge.
The state is heavily invested in the school. They're funding teachers, maintaining curriculums, building the future. Yet, just steps away, the state's obligation to its past is literally rusting in the dirt.
What's fascinating here is how that proximity highlights the compartmentalization of local government.
What do you mean?
Well, the department that maintains the school grounds operates entirely independently from whatever department is tasked with social welfare.
Oh, right. They don't talk to each other.
Exactly. It creates these massive blind spots. A physical space can be highly monitored for one purpose, like education, while being a total void for another, like elder care.
And the void he was living in was incredibly grim.
Yeah.
The reports specify that there were absolutely no washroom facilities available to him. Because he was confined to this car, he was forced to ease himself right beside the vehicle.
That is just heartbreaking.
It is. He was living in heavily unsanitary, completely exposed conditions.
You know, when we talk about human dignity, we often discuss it in these abstract terms like free speech or voting rights.
Right, the big constitutional ideas.
Exactly. But at its core, dignity is heavily tied to our ability to manage our basic physical and biological needs in private.
That makes total sense.
When a system allows an elderly person to be reduced to navigating their bodily functions in the dirt next to a public road, it signals a massive breakdown in fundamental human rights.
It really makes you wonder about the breakdown at the neighborhood level, too.
Oh, definitely.
Because we are talking about an area with a school, which means daily foot traffic, parents, teachers, local officials.
Hundreds of people.
Right. How do hundreds of people walk past a senior citizen living in his own waste and just do nothing? Is it just a massive diffusion of responsibility?
A diffusion of responsibility plays a huge role here, yeah. Everyone assumes someone else will make the call.
Or they think it's already being handled.
Exactly. They assume that because his presence is so obvious, the authorities must already know and have just decided nothing can be done.
So it just becomes normal.
Right, becomes a normalized tragedy. Over time, Mr. Ramdin stopped being seen as a human being in crisis and simply became part of the local scenery.
But the source material throws a massive curveball here. He wasn't entirely invisible.
No, he wasn't.
There was one specific day when the local authorities saw him very clearly.
Yes.
According to local residents, on Election Day, officials from the Enmore Hope NDC, the Neighborhood Democratic Council, actually came and collected Mr. Ramdin.
They facilitated his transportation straight to the ballot box.
Okay, let's unpack this, because my immediate reaction is sheer disbelief.
I know, it's wild.
They knew his exact location, they physically removed him from the squalor, drove him to a voting booth, and the moment he cast his ballot, they drove him back and left him in the unsanitary conditions.
Yeah.
I mean, is this a case of calculated, cynical exploitation for a single vote, or does it highlight a deeply broken, fragmented bureaucracy where the election department simply doesn't communicate with the social care department?
Well, if we look at the mechanics of bureaucratic architecture, it is likely the latter, though I agree the outcome feels just as cynical.
It really does.
It perfectly illustrates a concept you can call transactional citizenship.
Wait, what do you mean by transactional? Are you saying his value to the state is conditional on what the state can extract from him?
In a purely mechanical sense, yes. Bureaucracies view citizens through highly specific, isolated lenses based on their immediate mandate.
Okay, go on.
So, the electoral machinery is robustly funded and meticulously designed to be proactive. Voter databases are actively updated, addresses are mapped, and resources are deployed to mobilize voters because, well, political power depends on it.
So they needed him for that specific moment.
Exactly. On Election Day, the system viewed Mr. Ramdin strictly as a unit of political power.
So they had the logistics, the vans, and the personnel to find him when he was a metric they needed.
Exactly that. But the social safety net operates on a completely different framework.
Right. It's not proactive at all.
It's not at all. Social welfare systems are notoriously underfunded and designed to be passive. They usually require the citizen to be proactive, to fill out forms, to visit an office, to navigate automated phone systems.
And Mr. Ramdin, living in an abandoned car, obviously had no capacity to interface with a passive system.
None whatsoever.
The disconnect is still hard to fathom, though. The human beings who drove that NDC van saw a man living in a car.
Yeah, they were right there.
Even if their mandate was just to get his vote, how do they return him to that squalor and just walk away?
It really comes down to psychological compartmentalization and strict adherence to institutional roles.
Meaning they just stick to their job description.
Right. The officials in the van were tasked with election logistics, not social work. In highly structured bureaucracies, stepping outside your designated role to report a humanitarian issue often means taking on unpaid, complex labor that your department just won't support.
That is so bleak.
It is. So they complete their assigned transaction, check a box on a clipboard, and convince themselves that his living conditions are simply not their department.
It is almost like he existed on a spreadsheet for Election Day, but the social services spreadsheet was completely blank.
It highlights how dangerous it is to rely on metrics over humanity. The system functioned perfectly if the only metric of success was voter turnout.
But it failed catastrophically if the metric of success was the baseline welfare of the population.
Exactly.
So let's talk about how this finally broke open, because the situation didn't remain static forever.
Thankfully.
The sources detail a resolution, but the timeline leading up to it is pretty agonizing. According to the reports, residents in the area eventually did overcome that bystander effect.
They finally stepped up.
Right. They approached a government minister about the situation 3 months prior. They flagged the issue and pointed out the senior citizen living in the car.
And what was the response to that initial quiet approach?
Absolute silence. For 3 months, no action was taken. 3 months of navigating biological needs in the dirt. So the standard, quiet route of citizens petitioning their representatives completely failed.
Which is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, and that failure led to a secondary phase of very public escalation, an organization referred to in the text as WIN stepped in.
We should note the sources don't explicitly outline WIN's structural makeup, whether they are a charity, a community watchdog, or an advocacy group. But their tactical approach is what's critical here.
Right. They completely abandoned the quiet channels. When publicly called on Minister Vindhya Prasad,
They brought it into the spotlight.
they demanded that Mr. Ramdin be placed in a suitable care home where he could receive support and dignity. And they circulated photos highlighting the severe conditions of the car. They basically made it impossible for the authorities to claim ignorance.
They bypassed the waiting room and went straight to the megaphone.
I love that phrasing.
This is a crucial pivot in how accountability is forced. When residents complained quietly, there was no political or public cost to ignoring them.
Because nobody else knew.
Right. Bureaucracies, much like a sluggish immune system, will often ignore a localized infection if it isn't causing systemic stress.
That is a great way to look at it. The quiet complaint didn't trigger the immune response.
But a public pressure campaign acts like a massive fever. It threatens the overall health and public image of the administration.
Oh, I see.
By publishing photos and issuing direct public demands to specific ministers, WWIN created a scenario where the cost of inaction suddenly outweighed the cost of simply deploying a social worker.
And that fever broke the system open, culminating in a high-level political intervention.
It finally got moving.
Yeah. The opposition leader, Mohammed, eventually issued a statement expressing satisfaction that Mr. Ramdin would now have shelter. He specifically noted feeling blessed to be able to highlight the plight of vulnerable Guyanese and hold this government accountable so that solutions can be had.
Right.
And it's important for us to step back here as analysts. I want to be very clear to you. Listening, we aren't here to defend the government's previous 3 months of inaction.
Absolutely not.
Nor are we here to cheerlead the opposition leader's political maneuvering. Our job is just to look at the mechanics of this source text, how political leverage was ultimately the tool required to fix a humanitarian failure.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, analytically speaking, we are observing a system that is entirely reactive.
How do you mean?
Well, the provision of shelter wasn't triggered automatically by a vulnerable citizen in need.
Right, it took months.
It was triggered because a political rival utilized the situation as a lever to demonstrate the current administration's failures. The humanitarian aid was a byproduct of political combat.
So what does this all mean? Because that makes the resolution feel incredibly fragile.
It is fragile.
I mean, yes, Mr. Ramdin getting out of that car is a positive outcome. But systemically, it means that social care is only activated when it becomes politically expedient to do so.
It reveals a terrifying vulnerability in the social safety net. If basic intervention requires an organization to launch a media campaign and an opposition leader to use you as an accountability point against the government, what happens to the people who don't go viral?
They just stay in the car.
Exactly.
That is the dark reality of relying on an immune system that only reacts to the loudest fevers. It leaves the vast majority of the invisible population entirely dependent on chance.
Just hoping to be seen.
Right. The chance that someone with a camera and a platform happens to walk by and decide they're suffering is useful for a news cycle.
It really demands that we rethink how community intervention is structured.
Absolutely.
A robust society shouldn't require a national media scandal to provide a washroom and a bed for an elderly man. The mechanisms for care should be as proactive and well-funded as the mechanisms for collecting votes.
That is the crucial takeaway. So let's quickly recap the journey we've mapped out today. We started with the jarring physical reality of Mr. Cyril Ramdin, a pensioner rendered invisible by his own community, living in an abandoned car right next to a state-funded primary school.
We examined the paradox of his temporary visibility on Election Day, highlighting how fragmented databases and compartmentalized duties allowed officials to extract a vote while actively ignoring his squalor.
And finally, we tracked the grueling mechanics of accountability. We saw how quiet, polite complaints yielded a 3-month delay.
and how it ultimately required that public pressure campaign from Wynne.
Right, combined with the political leverage of an opposition leader just to force the system to provide him with basic shelter.
It's a lot to process.
It is. It is a powerful reminder for you listening right now that analyzing these highly localized individual stories is often the only way to expose the massive structural flaws in our institutions.
It reminds us that civic infrastructure isn't just about roads, schools, or voting booths. It is the invisible safety nets we weave for the most vulnerable. And those nets clearly require constant, vigilant maintenance to prevent people from slipping through.
We have to actively train ourselves to see the things our brains naturally want to edit out. We have to look at the abandoned cars just as closely as we look at the schools.
Which brings us back to the core tension of this entire situation.
Where does that leave us?
Well, I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over. If a person's value to the system is occasionally reduced to a single vote on a single day, what everyday mechanisms do you think are necessary to ensure that their dignity is upheld for the other 1,460 days of an election cycle?